Hello my dear students. In this video you are going to learn what is an inverse function, and you also learn how to find the inverse of a given function. But first let us define what is an inverse function. If f is a function from x into y and that function is one-to-one function, then another function which are assigned to each y in y, that is the codomain of f, a unique element x in x, that is the domain of f, that function is called an inverse of f. And the inverse of the function f is denoted by the symbol f raised to the power of minus 1. That is the symbol of f inverse. That is the inverse of the function f. Thus, if you have f as the function, then it is inverse. It will now be another function from y into x, meaning it will pick each and every element in y and assign those elements to unique elements x in x. The diagram below shows the relationship between the function f and its inverse. Looking at those diagrams, look at the diagrams below. I have two diagrams that you can see now. In the first diagram, you can see the function f. That function f, you can see its domain is set x and its codomain is set y. You can see the assignation is from set x into set y. But in the second drawing, that is your function, that is the inverse of the function f. You can see the assignation is from y into x in the f inverse. Look at the arrowheads. It is from right to left. But in the function f, it is left to right. So f inverse would now be a function from y into x, if f is the function from x into y. But you have to take note, the range of f now serves as the domain of f inverse, and the range of the inverse will now serve as the domain of the function f. So next we learn is how we can find the inverse of a function. To find the inverse of a function, we use this rule. To find the inverse of a function f of x, for example, what we simply do, you follow these 4 steps. Step number 1, it says in the given definition of the function f of x, we replace that f of x with y. So where you have f of x in the given definition, you replace it by y. Next, you now do interchange the x and y variables. Where you have x, you put y there, and where you have y there, you put x there. You interchange those variables. Y will now replaces x, and the x will now replaces y. When you do that now, step number 3, it says you have to solve for y, meaning you have to make y subject of the formula. When you do that, step number 4, which is the last step, is to replace the y. Where you see y there, you replace it by the f inverse of x. When you do that, you successfully find the inverse of a given function. We will take examples. Example number 1, it says f of x is a function and is defined by the formula f of x equals to x plus 5 all over 3. And this happens for every real number x. The question asked is to find the inverse of the function f. Solution to this problem, what we do first is to copy the definition of the function f of x equals to x plus 5 all over 3. Then next is to take step 1. Step 1 says we have to replace the f of x by y. So we now have y equals to x plus 5 all over 3. I have replaced the f of x with y. Next is to interchange the x and y variables. So where I have x, I put y, and where I have y, I put x. So this gives x equals to y plus 5 all over 3. I have replaced y with x and x with y. So I continue. This is step 2 is done. Step 3 says we have to solve for y, meaning make y subject of the formula. So from this we have now to find y, or to make y subject of the formula, we need to cross multiply. So cross multiplying will now give answer y plus 5 equals to 3x. The 3x is 3 multiplied by x. So to find y subject of the formula, we need to take this plus 5 by the left hand side to the right hand side. So taking plus 5 to the right hand side gives answer y equals to 3x minus 5. So I have successfully made y subject of the formula. Last step, it says replace y by the symbol f inverse of x. So I now have f inverse of x equals to 3x minus 5. This is the inverse of the function f. Another example, it says if f of x equals to 9x plus 2 and the g of x equals to x minus 2 all over 9, and these are functions. The question asked is to prove that the function f and the function g are inverse of each other. Solution to this problem. What we are requested to do in this question is to show that the inverse of f is exactly the same thing as the function g, and the inverse of the function g is exactly as the same thing as the function f. So what we simply do is to find the inverse of f and define the inverse of g. Then later we compare. So let's attempt to get the inverse of f first. So copying the f of x equals to 9x plus 2, that is the definition of the function f. So we attempt to get the inverse of this function f. Step number 1, remember, is replace the f of x by y. So replacing f of x by y gives answer y equals to 9x plus 2. Step number 2 says the variables x and y, you interchange them. Meaning where you have y, you put x there, and where you have x, you put y there. So this gives answer x equals to 9y plus 2. Step number 3 says you have to solve for y, meaning you have to make y subject of the formula. To find y subject of the formula, we need to take that plus 2 by the right hand side to the left hand side. So I'm going to have x minus 2 equals to 9y. To get y subject, we need to divide both sides by 9, the coefficient of y. So dividing both sides by 9 gives answer y equals to x minus 2 all over 9. Last we do is to replace the letter y by f inverse of x. So I now have f inverse of x equals to x minus 2 all over 9. This is the inverse of the function f. So I'll go ahead and find the inverse of the function g. So copying the formula for the function g of x equals to x minus 2 all over 9. To find the inverse of this function g, what we need to do first is to replace the g of x by y. So I'm going to have y equals to x minus 2 all over 9. Next step, it says the variables x and y, you interchange them. Where you have y, you put x there. Where you have x, you put y there. So this gives x equals to y minus 2 all over 9. Next is to make y subject of the formula. To make y subject of the formula, here we need to cross multiply. Cross multiplying gives answer y minus 2 equals to 9x. The 9x place is 9 multiplied by x. So we continue. Now to make y subject of the formula, we need to take this minus 2 to the right hand side. So I'm going to have y equals to 9x plus 2. So last we need to replace the letter y by g inverse of x. So g inverse of x is now equals to 9x plus 2. This is the inverse of the function g. So now we compare to see whether the function f of x is the same thing as g inverse, and to see that whether the function g is the same thing as the f inverse. So looking at the function f and the g inverse, look at them highlighted now. The function f, it says f of x equals to 9x plus 2, and we were able to find out that the g inverse is 9x plus 2. So those two functions are the same. Now let us also see whether the function g and the f inverse are the same. Look at the two highlighted now. The function g is x minus 2 all over 9, and the f inverse is also x minus 2 all over 9. Therefore, these two are also the same. G of x equals to f inverse of x. So what we asked to prove, we are able to prove it. Another example is says if f of x is a function and is defined by the formula bracket x raised to 3 minus 8 everything raised to the power 5. The question asked here is to find the f inverse of 0. F inverse of 0 simply means the image of 0 under the function f inverse. Solution to this problem. To answer this question, what we do first is to get the inverse of the function f. So copying the function f of x equals to bracket x raised to 3 minus 8 everything raised to the power 5. Step number 1, remember, in an attempt to get the inverse, what we simply do first is to replace the f of x by y. Replacing f of x by y give answer y equals to bracket x raised to 3 minus 8 everything raised to the power 5. Next we now do, it says the variable x and y, you interchange them. Interchanging those variables x and y, will now have x equals to bracket y raised to 3 minus 8 everything raised to the power 5. So next we do is to get rid of that 5, because the next step is to make y subject of the formula. You can see y is in the bracket, and that bracket has power 5. So you get rid of that power 5 first. To get rid of that power 5, now what we simply do, to both sides of our equation, we take the power of 1 over 5 to it. So taking 1 over 5, the power to both sides, will now have x raised to 1 over 5 equals to y raised to 3 minus 8. The power 5 by the right hand side is now cancelled by the power 1 over 5. So we continue. Next we now do this minus 8 by the right hand side, we take it to the left hand side. So we now have x 1 over 5 plus 8 equals to y raised to 3. Next we now do is to take cube root of both sides. So we now have y equals to cube root of x raised to 1 over 5 then plus 8. And the last is to replace the letter y by f inverse of x. So f inverse of x is now equals to cube root of x raised to 1 over 5 then plus 8. This is the definition of the inverse function. So next I will use this definition to find the image of 0. Image of 0 under this function f inverse is nothing but replace the x by 0. So we now have f inverse of 0 to be equals to cube root of 0 raised to the power of 1 over 5 then plus 8. The power 1 over 5, 0 to the power of 1 over 5 is simply 0. So I have cube root of 0 plus 8. And 0 plus 8 simply give answer 8. So I have cube root of 8. And the cube root of 8, the answer is simply 2. This is the image of 0 under the function f inverse. We have come to the end of this lesson. Let us now revise some of the things that we have learned. In this video, you have learned that if f is a function from x into y, then the inverse of the function f, denoted by this symbol f inverse, will now be a function from y into x. You have also learned in this lesson that the range of f is the domain of f inverse, and the range of f inverse is the domain of f. You have also learned in this video the 4 steps process to find the inverse of a function. And these are some of the things we have learned in this video.